morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Sophia Arend, and I'm a senior analyst at the Global Blockchain Business Council, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the third installment of the GBBC's Virtual Members Forum with GBBC member Soramitsu. For the coming months, the GBBC will be hosting these bi-weekly webinars to showcase the innovative work of our members around the world. And today, we are joined by Makoto Takemiya, co-founder and CEO of Soramitsu, Taylor West, Chief Strategy Officer, and Alice Jivkovic, Chief Technology Officer. This team joins us from all four corners of the world today for a presentation and audience Q&A on Project Bakong, Soramitsu's joint collaboration with the National Bank of Cambodia to create the world's first blockchain-based retail payment system run by a central bank. By way of background, Makoto is the co-founder and CEO of Soramitsu. Prior to founding Soramitsu, Makoto was a research engineer at ATR's Department of Neuroinformatics. He has authored more than 20 peer-reviewed scientific papers, actively engages in research, and has been instrumental in the design of blockchain-based Project Bakong, D3 Ledger, and the Sora decentralized autonomous economy. Makoto has a Master's of Science in Computer Science from the California Polytechnic State University at San Luis Obispo, and is currently pursuing a PhD at the University of Tokyo. Dr. Alice Jivkov is the Chief Technology Officer at Soramitsu, where he is responsible for contributions to Hyperledger Iroha and several large-scale blockchain projects. Alice has been in IT for more than 20 years, successfully cooperating on many challenging IT projects and performing IT audits of mission-critical information systems in different domains. He has also been involved as a member of the expert witness teams in several prominent security fraud cases. Before joining Soramitsu, Alice was the Innovation Officer at Nova KBM, the second largest bank in Slovenia, and is a member of the supervisory board of the Slovenian press agency responsible for information technology. Lastly, we are joined by Taylor, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Soramitsu. Taylor has built several successful startup businesses, including an e-commerce operation that began in his garage and grew to a 50,000 square foot warehouse and over 2.5 million in revenue, to a food technology startup that was invited but declined to go on the hit TV show Shark Tank, to a retail and wholesale price arbitrage platform in collaboration with the Salvation Army that revolutionized how barcoded items could be sourced and resold at scale. Prior to joining Soramitsu, he spent several years as an educator, podcaster, and speaker in the cryptocurrency space, as well as serving as the COO of a private blockchain incubator in Thailand. We welcome your questions at any point during today's webinar, and we ask you to submit them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Thank you, Makoto, Taylor, and Alice for joining us. And without further ado, I'll hand things off to you.
Great. I assume everyone can hear me fine. I'm Makoto Takemiya. I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm actually a naturalized Japanese citizen, for those of you who don't know me. That's why I look kind of like a white dude sitting here in Japan. Hey, why not? I'm kind of a computer scientist by background, as the introduction said, and I've worked in research and done quite a lot of, I think, interesting work in my life, so I'm very happy about that. I was lucky enough to kind of meet a good team and form Soramitsu with two other co-founders back in 2016. And we've kind of grown from this really tiny startup where we literally slept on like the floor I slept on like the floor of my co-founder for like a year, kind of getting this ready. And as part of that, we've kind of grown up and become quite a big company now. We're more than 70 people. We have offices in 5 countries, and we have, I think, some very interesting projects. Today, I'm going to talk about our work with the National Bank of Cambodia, which is, I think, it's quite a bounds-pushing project that's very innovative in many ways, and it uses some of our core technology, for example, Hyperledger Iroha. And if there's time, I'll briefly introduce some of the aspects of Iroha as well. And we've used Iroha for other exciting projects. We've worked for a while with the National Settlement Depository of Russia, and also we did some work with the CSD in Slovenia. We've also created our own kind of blockchain-based token and decentralized economic system that we call Sora. This actually launched just a few months ago, and we're continually updating this system. It's quite I think, a balance-pushing project as well. And we've also done a lot of work with identity. So for example, working with Bank Central Asia and Indonesia. And then finally, we do quite a lot of, I guess, basic protocol development. And we've worked with Web3 Foundation to build the C++ implementation of the Polkadot runtime environment, or Polkadot host, it's called. And we also have been working, it's not on the slide, but we've been working with Filecoin on their C++ implementation as well. So we've done quite a lot of basic blockchain protocol development. And I like to think that our team is really, you know, some of the world experts in the way blockchains are designed. And, but really, you know, this is just a tool that should facilitate some kind of application that makes an impact on people's lives. And for us, one of our most important projects is really the work in Cambodia, because that is a project that can potentially have the impact on millions of lives. And just before I get into that, you know, central bank digital currencies are really, I guess, hot topic, or really popular topic right now. Everyone seems to be talking about these. Ever since really Libra was announced last year, everyone's been scrambling to think, you know, how do we, you know, it's like the fear of missing out, or maybe kind of just the fear that Facebook will eat the world. I don't know. But everyone has been really looking suddenly into digital currencies. Now, there have been a few central banks that have been doing this much longer. So for example, in China, the People's Bank of China has been working on this since, I heard, since 2014. So they were quite ahead of the curve. And I think part of that was because of the high digitization of payments in their country. And then you've got countries like Sweden in Europe, where you know, very few people are using cash. Everyone's using credit cards. So these mostly foreign credit card companies become systemic risks to the economy. And so the central bank, because it's their job to kind of provide you know, stable infrastructure for the country, they're looking at making their own project. Now, this is still, the e-krona project in Sweden is still very, very much just starting out. They're building a prototype, and then they have to get approval from the parliament to launch this. And it's still not, I think, clear all the aspects of what they're trying to do. But it's a very balance pushing project from what I hear. And then I was just in Ukraine, actually, before all these lockdowns started for a digital currency conference. And they talked, of course, about their work on the e-hryvnia. And I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but there also were quite a lot of other central banks there, including central banks not using blockchain. So Central Bank of Ecuador was there, and they were talking about their work, which is quite famous, on using not blockchain, but creating a mobile payment system, which I think they were the first maybe in the world to pilot a system for retail mobile payments. But really, this is really a hot topic, and there's a few reasons why, especially in today's world, where there are a lot of, I would say, economic problems or economic challenges, and central banks are looking for new tools that they can use. And having greater insight into the flow of money in an economy and control over even things like retail payments can be a new tool that central banks can explore. But there's many ways that this can, many forms this can take. And in Cambodia, I think the work that we've done with the National Bank of Cambodia has been rather on the conservative side. It's really been focused on creating a system for production rather than doing you know, lengthy and expensive research. So so that's really why it is the world's first retail payment system that's run by central bank and using blockchain. And this pilot system started with real users last July, and it's grown to over 10,000 users now. And we have 13 financial institutions now, because one more joined this afternoon. And it's really quite an exciting system. So the goal really is to make it so that anyone with a Cambodian phone number can basically send and receive you know, payments. It's really a simple thing. It's something that in many countries people take for granted. But in Cambodia, because of the high unbanked population, And other types of difficulties, people don't really trust a lot of digital payments. They don't really trust banks as much as having cold hard cash in their hands. So there was really more of a need for, I guess, a public or a central bank sponsored infrastructure than you'd have in other countries. So I'm just going to briefly go over some of the features of the system, the architecture, show a demo, and I think it'll be great to hear your questions. So the system really started back in 2016. Before we got involved, the National Bank of Cambodia started to explore new types of payment systems, including those using blockchain. Because it is kind of like, developing country, they don't have a lot of money for infrastructure. They decided to use blockchain because it can give you a really highly secure system that has trust minimized features for a reasonable cost. So if you look at things like Bitcoin, I mean, just intuitively, anyone can run a payment system or join the payment network using basically consumer hardware, not for the mining, but for the transaction processing part. And it's a system that has withstood all kinds of problems, and it still runs today. And so there's a case that can be made where this highly resilient blockchain infrastructure can lead to kind of infrastructure that anyone can use in a public context that can really scale to maybe even the entire world in the future with high reliability. So central banks started to look at blockchain payments back in 2016. They came to us in 2017. That's really where this project was kicked off. We built a simple prototype, and then we worked with the MBC team to build a full system. And the cool thing is we didn't really have to build everything on our own, because the MBC technical department was also really interested in blockchain and interested in this type of payment system. And so we were able to do kind of a collaborative development where they did some of the development themselves as well. And it's really been kind of a great partnership. And I think that's one of the reasons why we were able to really push the bounds of technology so fast. And then later, of course, some very well-known names: Deloitte, KPMG, Netitude, which is Lloyd's register company. They came in and have helped to audit the system. But the core of the system really is the mobile app, because the goal is to focus on retail payments. And so I think it'd be great if I can show a demo of how the app works. So you should be able to see my screen now. I'm going to have Taylor show me his QR code, and assuming I can use Zoom to open my thing. Okay, so I've got my, it's able to read Taylor's QR code. So thanks, Taylor. So as you can see on the screen, there's two currencies here. There's the Khmer Rio, which is the local currency in Cambodia, and there's the US dollar. And I'm able to send just one reel. So I'll send one reel and maybe a message like, hi. Here, I'll send emoji. Hit send. So I can check the details, and then it's the funds are on their way. And then it's really just a matter of waiting a couple seconds. And as you can see, it's already done and processed. Oh, and he has it on his phone, but I don't have the ability to share my Zoom screen. But yeah, as you can see, it says success, and my balance has gone down by 1 to 420. So this is actually real money, a real transaction that we sent. And the cool thing is, neither of us are actually in Cambodia right now. We are, well, I'm in Tokyo, stuck here, unable to leave my house almost. And Taylor, I think, is in Thailand right now somewhere. And so it really is a kind of very simple digital payment system that anyone can use. I think that is, don't want to spend too much time on a demo, but that's the basic idea. You don't have to use QR codes to send. You can also type in things like an ID or even a phone number. So it really is a flexible system, but you can see that I think everyone has the basic idea. Looks like there's a couple of questions, but I'll just kind of go on to these, I think, a little bit later, towards the end. But Zoom doesn't let me close. Okay, great. So yeah, so it's a really simple app. It's made to be really simple. This is something that really, banks can take this type of API and integrate it into their own apps or build, their own systems around this. It's really made to be as easy as possible for anyone to use. But at the same time, we also wanted to prevent, things like money laundering, and so there is a daily limit in the amount of money that you can send every day. Also, there's a two-tiered system of limits. So when you first install the app, you can choose to just register using your phone number. So if you do that, then you don't have to physically go to a bank and do the onboarding. This is great for financial inclusion, and it's perfect for people who maybe don't have a lot of money to send daily transactions, but just are regular hardworking people in Cambodia. But to prevent criminal activity, you really need to do a higher level of KYC and AML. And so what there's a very strict limit when you first register, only with your phone number. But then if you want to raise the limit, like I did, you have to go to a bank and physically give them the documents and get the teller to increase the limit. And this is done using backend applications that the tellers have that run on the desktop. One of the cool things also with this system is that if you do the KYC at the bank and get onboarded by one of the tellers, then if you lose your phone, then the teller can actually change the keys that are associated with your account. So this is one of the advantages of using the Hyperledger Iroha blockchain, is that we set a permissioning system where when you onboard at a bank, you grant permission to the bank to have this ability to change your keys. So it's kind of like, everyone at some point will lose or break their phone. I mean, it happens sometimes. So it really is important to have this safety net that any normal person can use the system without having to worry about losing their funds. And so that brings me into the architecture, where when people talk about central bank digital currencies or central bank payment systems in general, you always have to think of what is the role of the central bank, what is the role of the commercial banks. So in Bakong, the central bank runs all the core blockchain servers. And this is the ledger. This is the ground truth for who has what balances. But the entry point is really through the commercial banks. Because as a central bank, you don't want to disintermediate commercial banks, because it's the commercial banks that are giving credit in your economy, allocating different loans, making really important decisions that on the aggregate run the economy as a whole. And so you don't want to mess with that if you can. So when you onboard, you always onboard through one of the banks. So even though my balance in my app is actually shown on the balance sheet that the central bank has, they see it through the lens of the bank that I'm associated with, which is Foreign Trade Bank of Cambodia here in this example. So all the banks, all the users have to register through one of the partner institutions. So the money that I have really is counted towards their balance with respect to monetary policy. And so here's another example or another view of the same architecture. Each bank runs, mobile gateway that serves the mobile apps, and it can even serve other types of applications in the future if banks want to open up API access. And then the banks manage things like the user identity. So, KYC, things like that. That's done at the commercial bank level. The central bank doesn't, need that information. They don't really want to have that information. Instead, the central bank is focused just on the flow of money and payments in the economy. And it's each commercial bank to do the proper due diligence and tracking of their customers. Just like in today's system. The goal of Bakong and the design, it was done very strategically so as not to disrupt the current financial system that already exists. So really monetary policy shouldn't have to change at all using a system like this. In fact, it should complement monetary policy by giving greater insights. This system has been in the news quite a lot. I think even the World Economic Forum mentioned it in their report recently. And the pilot, like I said, launched last July. It's been in Japanese newspapers quite a lot, partly because we have an office here in Japan. And so there's been quite an interest in this, especially because countries like China are launching or piloting a digital currency. And then, of course, Facebook's Libra. Even the US has been talking about things like a digital dollar. So it's really been something that so many people all around the world have been really looking at and seeing. But really, the goal is to engineer a system that's usable for daily payments, not really to change the world. Now you might ask, why did we use blockchain for a system like this when the central bank runs all the core servers? I would say that one of the advantages is that you kind of are able to have all the banks and all the users kind of on the same playing field by having this master ledger that they all connect to. Now it's a two-tier system where the permissioning and the business logic is hierarchical, but really it flattens everyone. That simplifies the overall architecture quite a lot, especially compared to traditional systems like RTGS. And then this, I would also say, is important because it creates more of a trust minimized system where the central bank, they can't take your money even if they wanted to, because the keys are held on everyone's mobile phone. So that's an important point, and it's a big difference from maybe kind of traditional banking apps where users are just authenticated with a username and password. In Bakong, every transaction has to be cryptographically signed by by the device that the user has, and no one can fake that. So it's really a way to create like something similar to digital bearer asset or digital cash in some ways, but it is still a payment system or payment backbone system because you're doing it through the filter of the commercial banks. So it's kind of an interesting hybrid. Why did we do this system in the first place? So in Cambodia, there's a large unbanked population, and that's really a human tragedy in many ways, because without access to banking, it's really hard to move up in society. And you don't get same access to credit that other larger players would have. And also in Cambodia, there's a large domestic remittance market, whereas in many countries, there's cross-border payments are quite a big part of the GDP. In Cambodia, domestic payments are quite large, where people will come from the countryside and then move to the capital and then send money back home to their families who are still in the countryside. And so having a domestic payment system that is real time and for all intents and purposes instant is really important. And in Cambodia, there's also really not that many digital payment solutions that currently exist. Now, this has changed a lot in the past couple of years. So there's some really interesting systems like PayPay, for instance, and these can actually take advantage of Bakong because they're allowed to, they can actually connect to the system and then offer services to the users that are maybe more convenient than what they've had before. We calculated, and this is our own, internal calculations, that you can add around 1% to GDP, which would be about $1 million a day. Actually, this corresponds quite closely with other central banks' figures. So, for example, Bank Negara in Malaysia published a paper saying what would be the outcome of having digital payments, more digital payments in the country. And they said because of having to get or being able to get rid of cash handling and all the security and everything that you have associated with cash, you could add about 1% to GDP, which is quite good. I mean, it's an obvious thing that you do if you can do it, because especially in today's economy, every bit counts. Another benefit is that it does remove barriers to payments. It makes financial inclusion much larger in the country, and makes remittances really fast and easy. You can just send money to anyone's phone number, and I think that's really quite a useful thing to have in any society. It's just, you know, just like you can give cash to anyone, you should be able to make especially low value retail payments instantly. And this can also increase access to digital payments. So there's not really that large of a digital market right now. There's not like, you know, Amazon that people go on and buy things every day domestically in Cambodia. So by having easier digital payments, it also paves the way for more digital marketplaces and building the logistics solutions that kind of can go with that. And these are some of the main points. Now, there's a lot of other details, so I'll kind of see what kind of questions are being asked. But I wanted to kind of say a couple of things about how would we generalize this to other countries? What lessons could be learned? I would say that many countries can take this system more or less as is. We tried to design the system so that there's really minimal changes that would be needed to the banking infrastructure and monetary policy. This can be, I mean, there are some nuances. So for example, even when central banks introduced RTGS systems, there are changes in, for example, the liquidity that commercial banks had to keep on hand for payments. And it's the same thing here. You still have to have maybe an increase in liquidity for retail payments. But low value retail payments are just one part of an overall economy. So this shouldn't really cause any major changes to what you already have. I would say that in many countries, you might want to have more nuanced KYC tiers. So for example, especially tourist dependent countries should make it easier to do high value payments, perhaps at designated places like hotels or restaurants that you know, you have to do like maybe a very high value payment in one day when you're checking out. And having this type of system could make it easier for tourists to onboard without having to go to a bank and do the full KYC, which is not even possible in some cases. And I also think that having a KYC utility that, I'm not saying the central bank should manage identities, but the central bank should run kind of a platform that all the commercial banks can connect to and share what are called verifiable claims about identities in the country. So this can help reduce fraud and financial crime if done right. And I think it's kind of a no-brainer when you're creating a digital payment system already. And I think the architecture is very simple. Central banks should use more or less the same two-tier architecture. Even China is using a similar architecture where the central bank runs the core ledger and they have the ground truth about what settlement finality is on the ledger. And then on top of that, you have this kind of KYC sharing infrastructure. And then you have the gateways, perhaps not run by commercial banks, but maybe some consortia or you know, some similar structure to that. And then you'd have the commercial banks, and then finally the users being intermediated by the commercial banks. So that's kind of like how I would design a system if I was porting this to other countries. So with that, how should we do Q&A? There's quite a lot of questions here in this backlog.
Yeah, definitely. I can just scroll through and I can post some of them to you, and you all can tackle them as you'd like. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. And I think Alish and Taylor can help me answer some of these. I've got a few here in this Q&A list. It's kind of hard because in Zoom I can't see my cursor, but
yeah, so I can jump in. The first one is about the countries and markets that are good candidates for this payment solution. Definitely, as Makoto said at the beginning, definitely countries where maybe the payment infrastructure is not so well developed, or maybe people are not using for various reasons. the payment, and they can start using it as a next generation payment solution that is more, let's say, mobile oriented, and it's more real time or near real time, like you can see in our case. But that being said, Makoto and myself were very lucky to participate on the ECB workshop last December. And even well-developed markets, they have their own challenges where this kind of solution and CBDC can help solve them. In this particular case, as Makoto already mentioned, is the credit card market, which, for example, for Europe is kind of a problem. Maybe Makoto, you want to add something to this?
Well, yeah, it's a job of many central banks in their mandate to provide, stability in of the payment infrastructure. And I think that that having just a couple of credit card companies can potentially cause systemic issues. Another point, going back to developing countries, is the whole idea or the problem recently of de-risking, where for international cross-border remittances, a lot of banks in developed countries are scared of where the money goes after they send it to a developed country. And having a digital payment system could potentially give better insights into how the money is transferred. If you're just a worker going to, say, Australia, working and then sending money back to your family in, let's say, Tonga, there's very little risk that you're going to be involved in financial crime. And so, but banks in Australia are very scared of where the money is going to go, as an example, because they can't track it. A lot of times people take the money and then take out cash, and then you can't trace where the cash is going to. So that's where a digital payment system can potentially help. I'll just go through the list, I guess. Someone asked, what is the view on Hyperledger Quilt for payment transfers and solutions matching Quilt? So actually, maybe Alish can add in some more, but I thought we were thinking about making some integration with Quilt. So Quilt is a project in Hyperledger that facilitates kind of interchain transfers.
Yeah, I can just add to this that definitely it's interesting, and Soramitsu as a company, we believe that there will be many different ecosystems, and we would like to see bridging between those ecosystems. And now, if Hyperledger Quilt gives the tools for a certain ecosystem, then definitely we will try to bridge. And since we are in the same, under the Hyperledger umbrella, we should endorse this and try to support those things. But that being said, I think Makoto at the beginning mentioned that we are also working with the Polkadot. So we are bridging this. We build the bridge to Ethereum. We build the bridge to Bitcoin. So connecting different payment systems and different payment ecosystems is really, really important globally, I believe. And this is where we would also like to work with other providers to connect to the Bakong and do this bridging in the future.
Mm. Let's move on to the next question. So someone asked or said quite correctly that CBDCs have been discussed for years. What makes the conversations stakeholders are having about them today different? Well, I would say kind of the maturity of the discussion is much higher. I think in the early days, many of the CBDC discussions were about, in many ways, disintermediating commercial banks, or having something like narrow banks where the central bank creates all the money. And I think today there really aren't that many central banks looking at this kind of narrow banking solution, but rather they're looking at just creating kind of like an extension to what they already happened with RTGS, where the liquidity requirements for payments were increased, and they're just kind of increasing them a little bit more to facilitate daily low-value transactions as well as high-value transactions. And I think the biggest difference from maybe traditional payment systems is that the interface is quite different. So central banks now, for the first time, I think, are really looking at getting into the digital realm of the retail payments, which I think is quite interesting. Obviously, cash is a retail payment device, but I think there hasn't really been that much innovation as there could have been after the internet kind of went mainstream. And I think they're really just catching up on what the technology already has allowed for 20, 30 years, right? Why is Cambodia a good environment? I already answered that question. What role, if any, does Bakong play in increasing access to credit? Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so the credit really, I would say that Bakong can help access to credit by being able to allow potential creditors like microfinance institutions or banks to be able to monitor the transactional activity of users, of their users, right? So that they have possibly a better way to calculate trust scores in an easier and cheaper way, or credit scores, right? So that instead of having really kind of high risk, unsure calculations for high values, you can kind of expand this to really any kind of person who's involved in retail payments. Because a lot of people, well, microfinance is a big industry now in Cambodia, of course, too. This is just another tool that the industry can use to expand credit. And by increasing the confidence in the credits rating that the companies give, I think it can lead to a decrease in interest rates that are paid, and hopefully defaults. Let's see, is the design already flexible enough to handle interbank transfers? If yes, should the receiving bank also have Iroha as the protocol? Okay, this is very interesting because we're in the process of implementing a deposit switch in Cambodia where you can withdraw to even non-partner banks in the country. But that, what it does is it just goes from the Bakong system into the kind of the traditional payment switch that already exists, that's run by the central bank. So yeah, I would say the answer is yes, the system is flexible enough to kind of work between the two systems. And I mean, there's some nuances. There's not too much time to go into all the details. I could probably spend 20 minutes just talking about that. But yeah, that's the short answer.
I would just maybe add from the technical side, the users, the participants, they don't need to know about Iroha. They will just, use it through the API. So you don't have to care about the protocol level or any of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So another person asked the great question, how do we calculate the $1 million a day added to the economy? So this is a calculation that we did so actually the contribution is likely to be much higher, but we were trying to be conservative in the numbers. So if you just look at how much, just use time as your metric, you look at how much time is wasted in retail payments, taking out cash, going through the cash, like doing the payment, getting the change back. It takes some time. And also there's transportation costs of cash that are fairly well known. And if you take that together, you get like about 1% of GDP. You can probably add quite a lot more. We didn't really take into account, reduced need for things like ATMs. One ATM costs quite a lot of money for a bank to build. And then you have to Cambodia is a hot country. There's lots of rain. You have to maintain all these equipment all around the country. So really you'd have a much higher contribution to the economy if everyone used this system. Someone asked a really great question. Well, okay, so it got marked as a thing. Let's see. Taylor, why don't you choose one of these questions?
Sure. Actually, it disappeared. The education question.
Well, we can just answer it anyway. So someone asked, like, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that's the one you were talking about. Somebody asked what kind of education is needed to get people using Bakong, and if the general populace is aware of the blockchain system, and if they have any concerns about it. I actually just spent some time in. Can I request the screen really quick from you, Makoto? Can I grab that? Share screen. I'm gonna try it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I got it.
You should be able to, yeah.
Yeah, I got it. So, all right, here you go. So I actually just spent, can you see these 4 photos that are on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So I actually just spent some time in Cambodia before the lockdown happened in January. And I went there specifically to figure out kind of what's happening on the ground with Bakong and get my feet wet and understand what's happening in the country. And one of the first things that happened to me when I hit the ground in Cambodia was I made an ATM withdrawal and I got this pretty thing out of it, which, as you can see here at the bottom, it says copy. And this was a big bank ATM, one of the big, like, 5 banks, one of the top 5 banks in Cambodia, that gave me this $50 bill. And I didn't realize it right away. I guess I learned a lesson to check my money right when I get it out in Cambodia. But I guess this is a pretty rampant problem in the country. And I don't think it's going to take much to convince people that this is bad. So that's one factor, obviously, is the fraud level and the inconvenience of using cash. The other thing is, if you look at the neighboring country where I live right now, which is Thailand, we've had a similar system in Thailand to Bakong, but without the blockchain component. It's a behind-the-scenes system that connects every single bank in the country and a lot of other financial institutions, and it makes it really easy for the people to pay for pretty much anything. I was just on a run today, one of my daily runs, and I forgot my wallet at home. And on the way back, I wanted to buy some bananas for less than $1. And I didn't have any cash with me. So I asked if they had their QR code for prompt pay. And it doesn't matter who they bank with. I scan their QR code and it goes directly from my bank to their bank instantly and for free here in Thailand. So for a system like that to exist in Cambodia now, that's very similar and can achieve similar things and convenience as it does here in Thailand, I think the number one thing to convince people to start using the system is just going to be as the adoption starts to scale. So when I was there, there weren't very many ways to make digital payments. When I checked out at one of the most popular coffee shops in town, there were a couple QR codes on the counter, but this was one out of maybe 30 coffee shops that I went to during my trip, and this was the only one that I saw with any barcodes. And these are direct barcodes to the banks, like ABA Bank has their own app, their own system, and you scan it to do ABA Pay. But there's no system that connects everything together, and Bakong is that system. So the convenience of this is going to be paramount when it starts to roll out. It's still just in pilot stage, but that's how I would say I'd answer that question.
Yeah, and I think just to elaborate a little bit more, I mean, people don't know that blockchain is using Bakong, Bakong is using blockchain. But yeah, and it's a little bit late at night, sorry. And then it's the same thing in Thailand. No one knows what the technology is behind the scenes. They don't really care. They just care that you don't have to worry about fake money. You don't have to worry about getting charged a lot to use the system, and then it's just basically instant, and the money's with you everywhere.
Yeah, and the big payment provider like this, I had a conversation with a friend in the country who works in the financial industry, and he was telling me how Bakong will never work because these, like Wing is never going to adopt this. Why would they? They're your competitors. Why would they? They're going to have such a problem with this system. And then he said, let me open their app and let's see if they've even integrated. And he opened his app up, and literally he had Bakong on the Wing app, which is the biggest remittance provider in Cambodia. They have locations all over the country. And he opened it and he goes, oh, it's here. And he tried to send me a transaction to see how they integrated it and how they're doing fees, because it's up to the banks how they want to utilize the system, and if they want to charge fees, or if they don't want to charge fees and they just want to provide it as a convenience. So you can see here, he tried to send me 10 cents and it cost him 27 cents to send it. I'm assuming this is a flat fee, but I can't confirm that. And since this happened, we just got a push notification on Bakong like a week ago that said Wing has now opened up 50 plus branches in Phnom Penh so that you can onboard and offboard fiat in and out of the Bakong system, which is huge. So.
Yeah, NBC has been doing, I think, a really great job of trying to work with the different partners, and you know, it's their payment system, it's their baby, and they're doing, I think, a great job of kind of like promoting it, and it's been slowed a little bit, I think, because of COVID, but we'll see how things work in the next few months. Gee, there's so many questions.
We're running up on the hour, so maybe we do one more, but I just wanted to say, I think it'll definitely be interesting to see how the current crisis maybe increases the rate of adoption, and how the national bank maybe, we had a conversation earlier this week where the advisor to the Prime Minister of Malaysia on public health was saying how they were actually starting to give people electronic transfers of aid, and motivating them to actually participate in e-commerce. So I look forward to hearing how maybe Bakong plays a role in that in Cambodia as well.
Yeah, I hope it will in the future. Well, I mean, it's just starting out, really. So I think it's really got a long ways to go in, you know, education and getting the kind of the word out. But those who use it, which are mainly in the capital right now, I think people are enjoying the system. It's getting better. You know, almost weekly, there's new releases, there's new stores you can use it at, and there's easier ways to charge. So I'm pretty positive about the system. I think Cambodia is also a special place because the population is so young and kind of energetic. I think the average age was like 24, at least it was 3 years ago when I last checked this statistic. And so everyone's really kind of young, they're kind of energetic, they kind of have a lot of, I think, hope for the future, at least until recently. The economy was growing really fast. Let's hope it recovers. I think the whole world is, you know, it's not an easy time, but we'll get through it eventually. So I think that, yeah, it can take hold of daily life much faster in Cambodia than it could in other countries.
Absolutely. I think the sheer volume of questions that we've received today really speaks to the interest from our audience and everyone globally in this project and others like it, but particularly what you've done to launch this and kind of the user base that you've grown since then, and clearly what seems to be an upward growth trajectory. I'd like to thank you, Makoto, Alice, and Taylor, for joining us. It has been really excellent to hear more about Project Bakong, and also to hear about sort of the real human impact this is having in Cambodia. Congratulations on its launch and its growth. We really look forward to learning more about it and Soramitsu's other projects. We will send a follow-up email after this with links so you can learn more about Project Bakong and what Soramitsu is doing. Thank you to everyone who joined today's webinar. We will be hosting another one of these on May 14th at 9:15 with GBBC member EY on their baseline protocol. We are also hosting one on Tuesday in partnership with Global Digital Finance with Accenture's blockchain lead, Dave Treat, and that's focused on blockchain for enterprise and also central bank digital currencies and digital identity. So clearly a theme and a topic of interest right now in the industry. Thank you so much. And Makoto, I'll let you say some last words if you'd like.
Yeah, well, thanks for this opportunity. And we're happy to, I know there are lots of questions. Anyone can feel free to email me. It's just t@soramitsu.co.jp. So yeah, just drop me an email. I'll do my best to answer.
Excellent. We'll be sure to send that through.
Cool.
Well, bye, everyone.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good night.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Good day.